Donald Trump could pardon Diddy if Diddy gets convicted. And I'm not just saying it. Donald Trump said it today. And it's both stunning and in a way predictable. And I want to talk about this because I am fascinated by what is going on in Donald Trump's world. And, I just finished doing our podcast, Two Angry Men, with Mark Garagos, who is my co-host on the show, on the podcast, whose daughter, Tenny Garagos, is one of Diddy's defense lawyers. Mark is not allowed to really speak about the case because of this gag order, which I think is, frankly, unconstitutional. That's another story. But Joe Tacopina, an incredible defense lawyer, joined us, and we talked about this. Joe Tacopina represented Donald Trump in the sexual assault trial with Ms. Carroll. And I got to say, he made some points that really made me think. And he said, look, Donald Trump now says that he has not been directly contacted by anybody in connection with Diddy, but Diddy used to like him a lot. Once Donald Trump started running for office, Diddy took some shots at him, and Donald Trump mentioned that, but said he used to like me a lot. And if he is treated unfairly, and I believe that, I would consider a pardon. He said that in the middle of the trial, which is crazy, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But when you think about the lens through which Donald Trump views the justice system, it is really interesting because Donald Trump thinks he was a political target with 4 prosecutions. And I got to say, the Stormy Daniels prosecution, I have always had trouble with. That is, 34 felony convictions for having sex with a porn star and not coming clean about it. When you look at that, who else would be treated that way? And again, I don't care what you think of Donald Trump. Forget about what you think about Donald Trump for a minute, because I'm not going to say, look, I knew him for 20 years before he ran for office. And I've had a lot of problems with Donald Trump, with his positions, various positions. But I got to say, when you look at like the Stormy Daniels prosecution, and I got to say, with the way they heaped on, case after case against him, his view of this is that the justice system is stacked against political opponents. And that's his lens. He thinks that's the way the system works. And Joe Tacopina had some interesting thoughts about that. He said, look, anybody who is targeted in a criminal justice system and comes out either clean or even if they're convicted, believes they were mistreated, when they get out, they never view it the same. Even if it's a progressive Democrat going in, if they feel they've been mistreated, coming out, they have disdain for the justice system. Donald Trump clearly has disdain, but in some ways, you got to understand that. You got to understand where he's coming from, that he thinks that this is all lawfare. And look, I mean, we've kind of seen it on both sides. Joe Biden said that about the prosecution of his son, Hunter Biden, when he pardoned him. So it's on both sides that people feel like the justice system is weighted against them. So it's not unsurprising that Donald Trump would start pardoning people, A, who supported him, and B, who he believes were unfairly treated. Even if we don't feel they were unfairly treated, we're not looking at their cases through his lens. So it seems crazy sometimes, I think, when you look at the January 6th pardons, when you look at the Todd Chrisley pardon, when you look at various other pardons, you're thinking, why is he doing this? Well, there's an answer to that. So what I asked Joe Tacopina today was, look, what about his kids all of a sudden coming out and supporting Trump? The way the Chrisley's daughter came out and supported Trump, the way the Chrisley's daughter spoke at the Republican convention, the way she wore a Make America Great Again hat, the way she supported Donald Trump. That made a big difference in the decision to pardon her parents. So if Diddy's kids receive that message and Donald Trump is as transactional as he clearly is, what would happen if Diddy's kids just suddenly, not in court, not wearing a MAGA hat in court, but suddenly show their support for Donald Trump's once friend, Diddy? What if they do that? As transparent as it would be, Donald Trump seems to like things like that. Now, the final thing I want to say is this. I asked Joe Tacopina, what about Trump's comment? What does it do to the jury? And he thought it was a nightmare for Diddy that Donald Trump said this. And the reason he thinks that is when the jury goes into deliberations, they could end up saying, well, look, I mean, even if we convict him, because we kind of think he's guilty, we're not sure he's guilty, but if we find him guilty, he's probably going to get pardoned because Trump kind of sent that message. So we might as well convict him, do what we think is right, even though we don't know it's right, and he'll get pardoned anyway. So Tacopina thinks this was awful for Diddy that Donald Trump said this in the middle of the trial. I'm going to end by telling you a quick story. When I was, I think, 19 years old, the Charles Manson case was being tried in Los Angeles, and the jury went up the stairs into the courthouse one day, and there was a newsstand, and there was a Los Angeles Times newspaper with a headline that said, "Manson guilty, Nixon declares," when President Nixon was president. The defense went in and asked for a mistrial because they said the jury was so influenced by Richard Nixon, who was president, that Charles Manson and his followers could not get a fair trial. The judge actually took that seriously, did not grant the mistrial, but it was a huge deal that Richard Nixon had said that, and the jury saw that headline. So presidents make a difference. And I just think this is so interesting that right in the middle of this trial, Donald Trump gets lobbed this question, and he inserts himself into the United States versus Sean Combs. It is just an amazing world we live in.